Some people say that Christmas is a time for miracles. Dr. Adrian Cole would have told you that miracles don't exist, that they're nothing more than statistical anomalies dressed up in tinsel and false hope. At 34, Adrian had seen enough death, enough suffering, enough families shattered by impossible diagnoses to know that the universe doesn't care about your wishes or your prayers. But then he met Ezra Bennett. And everything he thought he knew about miracles, about hope, and about love changed forever. This is their story. The emergency room of St. Catherine's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and desperation on Christmas Eve. Adrian Cole moved through it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd long ago learned to build walls between himself and the suffering around him. His white coat was crisp, his stethoscope cold, his expression carefully neutral. "Dr. Cole, we need you in Trauma 3, a nurse called out, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the ER. Adrian didn't look up from the chart he was reviewing. "Give me 2 minutes. It's a 19-year-old male. Syncope, possible cardiac event. He's asking for you specifically." That made Adrian's head snap up. "Asking for me? I don't know any." "He said you treated him 6 months ago. Ezra Bennett." The name meant nothing to Adrian. He saw hundreds of patients. They blurred together after a while, a parade of bodies and symptoms and insurance forms. But something in the nurse's expression, a softness, a kind of sadness, made him set down the chart and follow her immediately. Trauma 3 was one of the smaller rooms, tucked away from the main flow of the ER. When Adrian pushed through the door, he found a young man sitting on the examination table, his legs dangling over the edge, looking remarkably calm for someone who'd just collapsed in the hospital lobby. Ezra Bennett was beautiful in a way that caught Adrian off guard. He had dark, unruly hair that fell across his forehead, warm brown eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies, and a smile that somehow managed to be both fragile and radiant. He wore a paint-stained sweater that was 2 sizes too big, and his fingers were ink-stained, suggesting he'd been drawing recently. "Dr. Cole," Ezra said, and his voice was soft, a little breathless. "You probably don't remember me." Adrian approached the bedside, his professional mask firmly in place. "Mr. Bennett, the nurse said you had a syncopal episode. Can you tell me what happened?" "I remember you, though," Ezra continued, as if Adrian hadn't spoken. "You had kind eyes. Even when you were trying to be all stern and doctor-like, your eyes gave you away." Adrian felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He reached for Ezra's wrist, checking his pulse. "I need you to focus, please. Did you lose consciousness? Any chest pain? Shortness of breath?" "All of the above," Ezra said with a shrug that was far too casual. "But that's not really news, is it? You've got my file right. You know what's wrong with me." Adrian pulled up the digital chart on the nearby tablet, and as he scrolled through it, his professional composure faltered. Dilated cardiomyopathy, advanced stage, previous admissions for heart failure, medications that read like a pharmacy inventory. And there at the bottom of the chart, a note that made Adrian's blood run cold. Patient declined heart transplant list, DNR on file. "Mr. Bennett." "Ezra, please." Those brown eyes met his, and Adrian saw something in them that he hadn't seen in a long time. Not resignation, not fear, but a kind of peaceful acceptance. "I know you're going to tell me I should be on the transplant list. You're going to say I'm too young to give up. Everyone says that. But here's the thing, Dr. Cole, I'm not giving up. I'm just choosing to live differently." Adrian set the tablet down, his jaw tight. "You're 19 years old. With a transplant, you could have decades. Or I could spend whatever time I have left waiting, hopping, living in hospitals instead of living my life." Ezra's smile was sad but firm. "I've made my choice. I'm here because I needed to make sure everything's still, manageable, that I have enough time to finish what I need to finish." "And what's that?" "My art," Ezra gestured to a worn backpack on the chair beside the bed. "I'm a painter. Well, I'm trying to be. I want to create something beautiful before I go, something that matters, something that makes people feel less alone." Adrian felt that uncomfortable twist in his chest again, sharper this time. He'd been a doctor for 12 years. He delivered news of terminal diagnoses with clinical precision. He'd held the hands of dying patients and felt nothing but a distant professional sympathy. But something about Ezra Bennett, about the way he talked about death like it was just another journey, about the light that somehow still lived in his eyes, cracked something in Adrian's carefully constructed armor. "I need to examine you," Adrian said, his voice rougher than he intended. "And then we're going to adjust your medications and discuss a treatment plan that keeps you stable. Even though I'm going to die anyway." "Everyone dies eventually, Mr. Bennett. My job is to make sure it's eventually and not soon." Ezra's smile widened, genuine this time. "See, kind eyes." The examination revealed what Adrian already knew. Ezra's heart was failing. His ejection fraction was dangerously low, his lungs showed signs of fluid buildup, and his body was slowly shutting down. But Ezra sat through it all with patient grace, answering questions honestly, never flinching when Adrian delivered bad news. "I'm admitting you," Adrian finally said, "at least overnight. We need to get the fluid off your lungs and adjust your medication regimen." On Christmas Eve, Ezra looked genuinely distressed for the first time. "Dr. Cole, I have plans." "You almost died in my lobby." "Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades." Ezra grinned at Adrian's unamused expression. "Come on, that was funny." "No, a little funny. Mr. Bennett." "Ezra." Adrian exhaled slowly, counting to 10 in his head. "Ezra, you need to take this seriously." "I do take it seriously." And just like that, Ezra's playfulness evaporated, replaced by something deeper, more vulnerable. "I take every single day seriously, Dr. Cole. Every breath, every heartbeat. I'm aware of all of it in a way most people never have to be. I know I'm dying. I've known since I was 17. And I've spent the last 2 years figuring out how I want to live with that knowledge." He reached for his backpack, pulling out a battered sketchbook. "Can I show you something?" Adrian wanted to say no. He wanted to maintain professional distance, to not get drawn into this patient's story any more than he already was. But instead, he found himself nodding. Ezra opened the sketchbook, and Adrian's breath caught. The pages were filled with stunning watercolor paintings, landscapes painted in colors that seemed to glow, portraits of people laughing and crying and loving, abstract pieces that somehow captured emotions Adrian couldn't name. Every image was signed with a small heart in the corner. "This is what I do with my time," Ezra said softly. "I paint, I create, I try to leave something beautiful behind. And yeah, maybe I should be spending every moment in hospitals, chasing treatments that might buy me an extra few months. But what kind of life is that? What kind of legacy?" He looked up at Adrian, and there was such earnest hope in his eyes that it hurt to meet them. "I'm not ready to die, Dr. Cole, but I'm also not willing to stop living just because I'm dying. Does that make sense?" Adrian opened his mouth to respond with something clinical, something professional, but instead what came out was, "Yes, it does." And in that moment, something shifted between them. It was subtle, barely perceptible, like the first crack in ice before it breaks. Adrian felt it in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years, not since. No, he wouldn't think about that, couldn't. "I'll stay overnight," Ezra said, breaking the silence, "if you promise to actually talk to me like a person and not just a collection of failing organs. Deal?" Adrian found himself almost smiling. "Almost. Deal. But I'm still your doctor, which means I'm going to be stern and doctor-like whether you appreciate it or not." With kind eyes. "Don't push your luck, Mr. Bennett." "Ezra." This time Adrian did smile, just a little. "Ezra." They admitted Ezra to a private room on the cardiac floor. Adrian told himself he checked on him multiple times throughout his shift purely for medical reasons. He told himself the way his heart rate picked up when he approached Ezra's room was just residual adrenaline from a busy ER shift. He told himself a lot of lies that night. At 11 p.m., when Adrian should have gone home, he found himself standing outside Ezra's door. Through the small window, he could see the young man propped up in bed, his sketchbook balanced on his lap, painting by the light of the bedside lamp. Christmas lights blinked softly from the window, casting colored shadows across Ezra's face. Adrian knocked softly before entering. "You should be sleeping." Ezra looked up and his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Dr. Cole, I was hoping you'd come back. Look, I'm painting the view from my window." He turned the sketchbook around. It showed the hospital courtyard below, transformed by Christmas lights and fresh snow into something magical. But what caught Adrian's attention wasn't the technical skill, though that was impressive, but the way Ezra had painted it. The lights weren't just lights, they were little bursts of hope. The snow wasn't just white, it held every color of the rainbow if you looked closely enough. "You see beauty where most people see nothing," Adrian said before he could stop himself. Ezra's eyes widened slightly. That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me in a long time." Adrian felt heat creep up his neck. "I should check your vitals." "You checked them an hour ago." "Well, I'm checking them again." But as Adrian reached for the blood pressure cuff, Ezra caught his wrist. His touch was gentle, his fingers warm despite the coolness of the room. "Why do you hate Christmas, Dr. Cole?" Adrian froze. "What makes you think I hate Christmas?" "You're the only person in this entire hospital not wearing something festive. No Santa tie, no reindeer pins, no holly in your pocket, and when you look at the decorations you get this look like they personally offended you. Ezra's thumb traced a small circle on Adrian's wrist, probably unconscious, definitely affecting Adrian more than it should. What happened? Adrian gently pulled his hand away, but he didn't leave. Instead, he found himself sinking into the chair beside Ezra's bed, suddenly exhausted. I lost someone, on Christmas Eve, 5 years ago. He didn't know why he was telling this stranger, this patient, something he'd never even told his therapist. But Ezra's eyes were so warm, so understanding, and Adrian was so tired of carrying this weight alone. His name was Marcus, Adrian continued, his voice barely above a whisper. We'd been together for 3 years. He was a teacher, loved Christmas, loved everything about the holidays. That night he was driving home from a Christmas party. Drunk driver ran a red light. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. He was brought to my ER. I couldn't save him. I couldn't. I tried everything, but he died in my arms while Christmas carols played over the hospital speakers. Ezra's hand found Adrian's again, and this time, Adrian didn't pull away. Since then, Adrian said, Christmas just feels like a lie. All this talk of miracles and magic and joy, it's just a way for people to pretend the world isn't cruel and random and utterly indifferent to our suffering. Maybe, Ezra said softly, or maybe miracles aren't about the world being fair. Maybe they're about finding light even when everything feels dark, about believing in connection and love even when we know it can be taken away. He squeezed Adrian's hand. I'm so sorry you lost Marcus, but I don't think he'd want you to lose Christmas too. Adrian looked up, meeting Ezra's eyes, and felt something crack open in his chest. You don't know anything about what he'd want. You're right, I don't. Ezra's smile was gentle, but I know what I'd want if I were him. I'd want the person I love to keep living, to keep finding joy, to keep believing that life, even with all its pain, is still worth celebrating. Adrian stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I should go, you need rest. Dr. Cole. Get some sleep, Ezra, I'll check on you in the morning. Adrian fled from the room, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. He made it to the doctor's lounge before his legs gave out, and he sank onto the worn couch, his face in his hands. What was he doing? Ezra was his patient. A terminally ill teenager who had no business worming his way past Adrian's defenses, who had no right to make Adrian feel things he'd buried 5 years ago. But even as Adrian tried to rationalize it away, he could still feel the warmth of Ezra's hand in his, could still see those impossibly hopeful eyes, could still hear that soft voice saying, maybe miracles are about finding light even when everything feels dark. Outside, church bells began to chime midnight. Christmas had arrived. And despite everything, despite his grief, despite his professional ethics, despite every wall he'd built around his heart, Adrian found himself thinking about Ezra Bennett's smile. And wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd stopped believing in miracles too soon. Christmas morning arrived with pale winter sunlight and the antiseptic quiet of a hospital on a holiday. Adrian had gone home for exactly 3 hours, showered, changed, and returned before his shift technically started. He told himself it was dedication to his patients. He knew it was a lie. Ezra was awake when Adrian entered his room, sitting cross-legged on the bed with his sketchbook open. He'd somehow acquired a Santa hat, probably charmed one of the nurses, and wore it at a jaunty angle while he painted. The sight was so absurd, so unexpectedly cheerful, that Adrian felt his carefully reconstructed walls begin to crack again. Merry Christmas, Dr. Cole, Ezra said without looking up from his painting. I'd offer you hot cocoa, but hospital rules and all that. How are you feeling? Adrian kept his voice professional as he approached the bedside. Honestly, better than I have in weeks. Ezra finally looked up and his smile was radiant. Whatever you did with my meds, it's working. I can breathe without feeling like there's an elephant on my chest. Adrian checked the chart, relief flooding through him. Ezra's vitals were indeed improved, not cured, never cured, but stable. The diuretics are working, but that doesn't mean you can go back to my normal life, I know. Ezra set down his brush. But here's the thing, Dr. Cole, my normal life isn't exactly strenuous. I paint in my apartment, I take walks when I feel strong enough, I avoid stairs. I'm not running marathons or cliff diving. You're also not taking this seriously enough. And you're taking it too seriously. Ezra's eyes held challenge now. I'm dying, Dr. Cole, that's a fact, we can't change it. But we can change how I spend whatever time I have left, and I choose to spend it creating, living, maybe even. He paused, a slight blush coloring his cheeks. Maybe even connecting with people who matter. Adrian felt heat prickle at the back of his neck. I'm your doctor. I know, but you're also a person who lost someone he loved, who's been hiding from life for 5 years, who needs to remember that closing yourself off from pain also means closing yourself off from joy. You have no right. You're absolutely correct. Ezra's voice was gentle, not argumentative. I don't have the right, but I do have perspective. When you know your time is limited, you see things differently. You see what matters. And Dr. Cole, Adrian, you matter. I can see it in the way you care for your patients, even when you're trying to pretend you don't. I saw it last night when you told me about Marcus. Adrian's throat felt tight. This is inappropriate. Probably, Ezra shrugged, then winced. Apparently that was still too much physical exertion. But so is dying at 19, and I'm dealing with it. Sometimes inappropriate is just honest. Before Adrian could formulate a response, his pager buzzed. Emergency in the ER. He should have felt relieved at the interruption, but instead, he felt oddly disappointed. I have to go, he said. I know, save some lives, Dr. Cole. Ezra picked up his brush again. But maybe, come back later. I'd like to show you something, if you have time. Adrian knew he should say no, should establish boundaries, maintain professional distance. Instead, he heard himself say, maybe. And the smile that lit up Ezra's face made Adrian's traitorous heart skip a beat. The ER was chaos for the next 6 hours. Holiday injuries, family gatherings gone wrong, the usual parade of human fragility. Adrian moved through it all with mechanical precision, but his mind kept wandering to the 7th floor, to a room where a dying teenager painted beauty into the world, and somehow made Adrian want to believe in things he'd long ago given up on. It was late afternoon when he finally made it back to Ezra's room. He knocked softly, half-hopping Ezra would be asleep, half-hopping he wouldn't be. Come in, Ezra's voice was bright. Adrian entered to find Ezra out of bed, standing by the window despite medical advice. He changed into his own clothes, jeans and a soft purple sweater that made his eyes look even warmer, and was staring out at the snowy courtyard below. You should be in bed, Adrian said automatically. I should be a lot of things. Ezra turned and his smile was mischievous. But right now, I'm inviting you to break about 17 hospital rules with me. Adrian's eyebrows rose. Excuse me. There's a small garden on the roof. One of the nurses told me about it. Patients aren't technically supposed to go up there, but Ezra gestured to the window where fat snowflakes were beginning to fall. It's snowing, Adrian. Real, actual Christmas snow. And I haven't been outside in 3 days. Please. Every rational part of Adrian's brain screamed no. Ezra was medically unstable. The roof would be cold, potentially dangerous. If anything happened, Adrian could lose his license, his career, everything he'd worked for. But Ezra was looking at him with those impossibly hopeful eyes, and Adrian found himself thinking, when you know your time is limited, you see what matters. 10 minutes, Adrian heard himself say, and you're wearing my coat. Ezra's face transformed with joy. Really? 10 minutes, Ezra, I'm serious. You're also amazing. Ezra grabbed his arm, squeezing gently. Thank you. The roof garden was small, probably no more than 20 by 30 feet, filled with dormant plants and snow-covered benches. It was also deserted, quiet except for the whisper of falling snow and the distant sounds of the city below. Adrian had never been up here in his 12 years at St. Catherine's. He'd never had a reason. Ezra stood in the center of the garden, his face tilted toward the sky, arms outstretched like he could catch the falling snow. Adrian's coat hung on his thin frame, making him look even younger, more vulnerable. But there was such pure joy on his face that Adrian felt something painful and beautiful twist in his chest. This is perfect, Ezra whispered. This is absolutely perfect. Adrian leaned against the wall, watching Ezra spin slowly in the snow, and felt the last of his professional distance crumble. This wasn't a patient anymore. This was a person, a beautiful, dying, impossibly hopeful person who made Adrian feel alive for the first time in 5 years. Why me? Adrian asked suddenly. Ezra stopped spinning, snow catching in his dark hair. What? 6 months ago, you came to the ER. I was probably one of dozens of doctors you saw. Why do you remember me? Why ask for me specifically? Ezra was quiet for a moment, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Then he walked over to where Adrian stood, close enough that Adrian could see the snowflakes melting on his eyelashes. You held my hand, Ezra said softly. When you told me the diagnosis was terminal, when you explained what it meant, you held my hand. Most doctors just talk at you, give you the information and move on. But you held my hand and you looked me in the eye and you said, I'm sorry, this isn't fair. Like you actually meant it. Like my life actually mattered to you, even though you didn't know me. Adrian's throat felt tight. He didn't remember that moment, didn't remember that particular patient among the hundreds he saw, but he believed Ezra because it sounded like something he would have done back then, before he'd become quite so hardened. I'm not a good person, Ezra, I'm not. I'm broken. I've been broken for 5 years. Then maybe we can be broken together. Ezra reached up, his cold fingers brushing snow from Adrian's hair, and the gesture was so intimate, so tender, that Adrian couldn't breathe. I'm not asking you to fix me, Adrian, I can't be fixed, but maybe we can be honest with each other, real with each other. Maybe we can make whatever time we have matter. I'm 34 years old, you're 19, I'm your doctor, this is complicated, inappropriate, against the rules. Ezra's smile was sad. Yeah, it is, but I'm dying, Adrian, and you've been dead inside for 5 years. Maybe we both deserve a chance to feel alive, even if it's complicated, even if it's brief. Adrian should have said no, should have stepped back, re-established boundaries, done the responsible thing. Instead, he found his hand rising to cup Ezra's face, his thumb brushing across the younger man's cheek. I can't watch another person I care about die, Adrian whispered. Then don't watch me die. Ezra leaned into the touch, his eyes closing. Watch me live, for however long I have, watch me live as fully as I can, and maybe let yourself live too. The snow fell around them, silent and perfect. The city sparkled below, and Adrian Cole, who had spent 5 years convinced that miracles were nothing but lies, felt something impossible bloom in his chest. I don't know how to do this, he said. Neither do I. Ezra opened his eyes, and they were shining, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can figure it out together. Adrian knew this was a mistake, knew he was crossing every line, breaking every rule, but as he looked at Ezra, at this dying boy who still believed in beauty and hope and connection, he realized he didn't care anymore. 10 minutes are up, Adrian said softly. Then we should go back, but neither of them moved. Ezra, kiss me. Adrian's breath caught. What? Kiss me, please. I know it's inappropriate. I know you're my doctor. I know I'm dying and you're grieving, and this is probably the worst idea either of us has ever had. Ezra stepped closer, his body nearly touching Adrian's. But I've been dying for 2 years and I've never been kissed. Not really, not by someone who matters. And you matter, Adrian, you matter so much, and I don't know why, but you do. Adrian's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. I could lose my job. I could die tomorrow. Ezra's hand found Adrian's, threading their fingers together. So which risk matters more? And God help him, Adrian couldn't think of a single reason why the risk to his career mattered more than this moment, this person, this chance at feeling something other than emptiness. He leaned down slowly, giving Ezra every chance to pull away, to change his mind. But Ezra didn't move except to tilt his face up, his eyes fluttering closed, his lips parting slightly in anticipation. When Adrian's lips met Ezra's, it was gentle, tentative, like touching something precious that might break. Ezra tasted like snow and hope, and his lips were soft, and when he made a small sound in the back of his throat, Adrian felt something in his chest crack wide open. The kiss deepened. Ezra's arms came up around Adrian's neck, and Adrian's hands settled on Ezra's waist, pulling him closer despite the cold, despite the risk, despite everything that made this wrong, because it didn't feel wrong. It felt like coming home after years of wandering lost. It felt like finding light in the darkness. It felt like a miracle, Ezra whispered against Adrian's lips. Adrian pulled back just enough to look at him. What? This, you, us. Ezra's eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is my miracle, Adrian, you're my miracle. And Adrian, who hadn't believed in miracles for 5 years, found himself believing again. They didn't talk about what happened on the roof. Not that night, not the next day when Adrian discharged Ezra with strict instructions and enough medication to stabilize him for at least a few weeks. Not when Ezra asked for Adrian's personal phone number, just in case, and Adrian gave it without hesitation. They didn't talk about it, but it was there between them, a new understanding, a shift in the atmosphere, a possibility that neither of them knew quite how to navigate. Adrian went home to his empty apartment and stared at his phone for an hour before Ezra's first text came through. Thank you for the Christmas miracle, E. Adrian's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He should shut this down, should tell Ezra they needed to maintain professional boundaries, should do the responsible thing. Instead, he typed, "You're welcome. Please take your medications on schedule." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, so stern and doctor-like, "Your kind eyes are probably rolling right now." Despite himself, Adrian smiled. They might be. I'm painting you, the version of you I see, not the one you show the world. Want to see it when it's done. Adrian's heart clenched. Yes. Good, because I'm going to need you to model for me. Professional medical consultation, very legitimate. You'll have to come to my apartment. Multiple sessions, purely artistic. That's not how medical consultations work. Then come as a friend, or whatever we are, come because you want to. Adrian stared at the message for a long time, then he typed, when? Tomorrow, I'll make you terrible coffee and show you my studio. It's tiny and cold and filled with paint fumes, but it's mine. Send me the address. The address came through immediately, followed by, Adrian. Yes. Thank you for seeing me, the real me, not just the dying kid. It means everything. Adrian's eyes burned. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, you're not just the dying kid to me either. Get some sleep, Ezra. Good night, Adrian. Dream of something beautiful. Adrian lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, his phone clutched in his hand. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't dread waking up. For the first time since Marcus died, he had something to look forward to. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was a miracle he never saw coming. Ezra's apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better days, probably sometime in the 1970s. Adrian stood outside, his breath fogging in the cold January air, wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. The door buzzed open before he could knock. 3rd floor, Ezra's voice crackled through the intercom. Fair warning, there's no elevator and I'm definitely not supposed to be climbing stairs, so this is already rebellion number 1 for the day. Adrian took the stairs 2 at a time, his medical instincts overriding his common sense. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, slightly winded, Ezra was standing in the doorway of apartment 3C, grinning. You ran up the stairs, you were worried about me. Ezra's smile was delighted. That's adorable. That's medical concern, Adrian corrected, but he couldn't quite keep the smile off his face. Sure it is. Come in before my neighbors see me fraternizing with a devastatingly handsome older man and start gossiping. The apartment was small, a studio, really, but it was transformed into something magical. Every wall was covered with paintings in various stages of completion. Canvases leaned against the furniture, paint supplies cluttered every surface, and the air smelled like turpentine and coffee and something uniquely Ezra. The single large window let in weak winter sunlight that illuminated floating dust motes like tiny stars. Welcome to my kingdom, Ezra said, closing the door behind them. It's not much, but... It's incredible, Adrian said honestly. He moved through the space slowly, taking in the artwork. There were landscapes painted in impossible colors, portraits that seemed to stare into your soul, abstract pieces that made Adrian feel things he couldn't name. And in the corner, on an easel draped with a cloth, was something Ezra was clearly hiding. Is that the painting you mentioned, the one of me? Maybe, Ezra moved to block the easel, protective, but you can't see it until it's finished. Artist's prerogative. Adrian raised an eyebrow. I came all this way. And I promised you terrible coffee. Sit, I'll brew. The coffee was indeed terrible, instant crystals mixed with tap water, microwaved until it was lukewarm. But Adrian drank it anyway, sitting on the worn couch while Ezra perched on a stool by the window, backlit by pale sunlight in a way that made him look ethereal, almost otherworldly. Tell me about Marcus, Ezra said suddenly. Adrian nearly dropped his mug. What? I want to know about him, about who he was, what he meant to you, why you loved him. Ezra's expression was gentle. You don't have to, but I think maybe talking about him might help, and I want to know the person who made you believe in love. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring into his terrible coffee. No one had asked him about Marcus in years. Most people avoided the topic, uncomfortable with grief, with loss, with the reminder that love doesn't always have happy endings. But Ezra was looking at him with such open compassion, such genuine interest, that Adrian found himself talking. He was loud, Adrian said softly. That's the first thing you'd notice about Marcus. He filled every room he entered with energy, with laughter. He taught 3rd grade, and he loved those kids like they were his own. He'd come home every day with stories, about the kid who finally learned to read, about the girl who stood up to a bully, about the boy who brought him a flower from his garden. Adrian's throat felt tight. He made me better. I was already cynical back then, already building walls, but Marcus would just barrel through them. He'd dance in the kitchen while making dinner. He'd sing off key in the shower. He'd leave notes in my coat pockets telling me he loved me. He made life feel like an adventure instead of just survival. He sounds wonderful, Ezra said quietly. He was, and then he was gone, and Adrian's voice cracked. I couldn't save him, Ezra. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to save people, but I couldn't save the one person who mattered most. Ezra set down his own mug and moved to sit beside Adrian on the couch. He didn't say anything, just took Adrian's hand and held it, his thumb tracing small circles on Adrian's palm. I'm terrified, Adrian admitted, of this, of you, of caring about someone again when I know how it ends. I know, Ezra said. I'm terrified too, but Adrian, he turned Adrian's face toward him, his touch gentle. I'm dying whether you care about me or not. The only difference is whether we spend whatever time I have being afraid or being alive. I don't know if I can do this. Then don't think about it. Ezra leaned in, resting his forehead against Adrian's. Don't think about tomorrow or next week or next month. Just be here now with me. Can you do that? Adrian closed his eyes, breathing in Ezra's scent, paint and coffee, and something sweet he couldn't identify. I can try. That's all I'm asking. They sat like that for a long time, foreheads pressed together, hands intertwined, breathing in sync. And slowly, Adrian felt some of the fear ease. Not disappear, it would never disappear, but become manageable, bearable, worth it. Will you model for me? Ezra asked eventually, for the painting. Now just sit by the window. Let me paint you the way I see you. Adrian had never been someone's model before. It felt strange, vulnerable, sitting still while Ezra studied him with an artist's intensity. But there was something meditative about it too, the quiet apartment, the soft scratch of Ezra's brush against canvas, the winter light slowly fading outside. Tell me about your work, Ezra said as he painted. Why did you become a doctor? My mother, Adrian said. She had cancer when I was 16. The doctors who treated her, they were kind, competent, present. They made her last months bearable. I wanted to be able to do that for other people. Do you still feel that way? Adrian thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about helping people and became about just getting through the day, going through the motions, not feeling too much. And now, Adrian met Ezra's eyes. Now I'm remembering why I started, because of you. Ezra's hand stilled on the canvas. Adrian. You make me want to be better, to care again, to actually see my patients as people instead of just cases. Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. You make me want to believe that what I do matters. It does matter. Ezra set down his brush and came to kneel in front of Adrian. You matter, not because you're a doctor, but because you're you. Because even when you're trying to be cold and professional, your kindness shows through. Because you held my hand when I needed it most. Because you kissed me in the snow even though it scared you. Adrian cupped Ezra's face, his thumb brushing across the younger man's cheek. You're supposed to be painting. I'm capturing you perfectly right now. Ezra's smile was soft. The real you, the one who feels everything but tries to pretend he doesn't. Adrian pulled Ezra up onto the couch beside him, gathering him close. Ezra fit against him perfectly, his head tucked under Adrian's chin, his body warm and solid and alive. For a moment, Adrian could almost forget about terminal diagnoses and borrowed time. For a moment, this felt like any other relationship, new, exciting, full of possibility. But only for a moment. How long? Adrian asked quietly. Ezra tensed. Adrian. How long do the doctors say you have? Does it matter? Yes, Adrian's arms tightened around him. I need to know, please. Ezra was quiet for so long that Adrian thought he wouldn't answer. Then, 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. My heart's deteriorating faster than they expected. The medications are buying time, but not much. 6 months, maybe a year. Adrian felt the world tilt. 6 months to a year of having Ezra in his life, and then... Don't, Ezra said, twisting to look at Adrian. Don't go to that dark place. I can see it in your eyes. Don't start grieving me while I'm still here. How can I not? How do I love you knowing? Adrian stopped abruptly, realizing what he'd just said. Love, he'd said love. Ezra's eyes widened. You love me. Adrian's heart was pounding. I don't know, maybe it's too soon, I shouldn't. I love you too, Ezra said simply. I've loved you since you held my hand in the ER 6 months ago, since you looked at me like I mattered, since you kissed me in the snow. Ezra, we barely know each other. So, when you know your time is limited, you don't waste it. You don't wait for the right moment or the appropriate timeline. Ezra's hands framed Adrian's face. I love you. I love your kind eyes and your stern doctor voice and the way you pretend not to care when you care more than anyone. I love that you're broken and scared and still brave enough to be here with me. I love you, Adrian Cole, and I don't care if it's too soon or too fast or too complicated. Adrian kissed him desperately, deeply, like he could pour all the words he didn't know how to say into the press of their lips. Ezra melted into him, his arms winding around Adrian's neck, and the kiss turned from desperate to tender, from frantic to slow and sweet. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ezra whispered, "Stay, tonight, just stay with me." Ezra. Not for sex, just to hold me, to be close, to pretend, just for a few hours, that we are normal people who met in a normal way and get to have a normal relationship. Adrian knew he should say no, knew this was crossing yet another line, blurring yet another boundary. But looking at Ezra, at his hopeful eyes, his trembling lips, his body that was so bravely fighting against inevitable decay, Adrian couldn't find it in himself to refuse. "Okay," he whispered, "I'll stay." They lay together in Ezra's small bed, Adrian's arms around Ezra, Ezra's head on Adrian's chest. Through the window they could see the city lights glittering against the dark sky. It should have been awkward. They'd only known each other for 3 weeks, and most of that had been as doctor and patient. But instead it felt right, natural, like coming home. "Tell me something no one else knows," Ezra said sleepily. "About what?" "About you, your secrets, your dreams, the things you don't say out loud." Adrian thought for a moment, his fingers carding gently through Ezra's hair. "I wanted to be a writer when I was young, before I decided on medicine. I used to write stories, poetry, terrible angsty teenage stuff. I haven't written anything in years." "Why not?" "It felt too vulnerable, too revealing. Medicine let me help people without having to expose myself." Ezra tilted his head to look up at Adrian. "Write about me, about us. When I'm gone, write our story. Make it beautiful, make it matter." Adrian's chest felt tight. "Ezra. Promise me, promise you won't just forget me, won't let this be just another loss you bury. Write it down, remember me, remember this." "I could never forget you," Adrian said fiercely, "but I promise, I'll write our story. I'll make sure the world knows about the boy who taught a cynic to believe in miracles again." Ezra smiled, his eyes drifting closed. "I like that, the boy who believed in miracles, that could be the title." "Ezra. I love you, I know it's too soon, I know it's complicated, but I do, I love you." "I know," Ezra's voice was drowsy, content. "I can hear it in your heartbeat." Adrian held him tighter, listening to Ezra's breathing slow into sleep. Outside it started to snow again, soft flakes drifting past the window. And Adrian, who had spent 5 years running from feeling anything, let himself feel everything, the love, the fear, the grief already creeping in at the edges. He let himself feel alive. Even if it hurt. Especially because it hurt. Because pain meant he was living again. And Ezra had taught him that living, really living, fully and bravely, was worth any price. January turned to February and February to March. Adrian lived in 2 worlds, the hospital where he was Dr. Cole, efficient, professional, slightly less cold than before, and Ezra's apartment where he was simply Adrian, lover, friend, believer. They developed routines. Adrian would finish his shifts and go straight to Ezra's, bringing groceries or takeout or whatever supplies Ezra needed for his art. They'd eat together, talk about everything and nothing, and then Ezra would paint while Adrian read or worked on patient notes. Some nights when Ezra felt strong enough, they'd venture out, to museums, to parks, once to a terrible indie film that made them both laugh until they cried. Other nights, when Ezra's heart acted up and breathing became difficult, Adrian would simply hold him, monitoring his vitals with professional precision, while whispering love and reassurance with personal devotion. It wasn't perfect. There were hard conversations about end-of-life care, about what Ezra wanted when the time came. There were moments of frustration, Ezra pushing himself too hard, Adrian being overprotective, and moments of fear when Ezra's symptoms worsened. Adrian officially transferred Ezra's care to another cardiologist to avoid conflicts of interest, though he still consulted on the case informally. But through it all there was love, so much love that sometimes Adrian couldn't breathe with the weight of it. On a Saturday in late March, Adrian arrived at Ezra's apartment to find the door unlocked and Ezra standing by the window, staring at something in his hands. "Ezra," Adrian closed the door behind him, concerned. "What's wrong?" Ezra turned and his face was wet with tears, but he was smiling. "Adrian, oh my God, Adrian." "What happened? Are you okay?" Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands automatically checking Ezra's pulse, his color, his breathing. "I'm okay, better than okay." Ezra held out what he'd been holding, a letter, official-looking, from a local art gallery. "They want to show my work. A real gallery, Adrian. A solo exhibition. They saw my Instagram and said my paintings were hauntingly beautiful and exactly what the world needs right now. Adrian's heart swelled. Ezra, that's incredible. That's when. May, they want to schedule it for May. Ezra's smile faltered slightly. That's 8 weeks away. I should still be. The doctor said I'd probably. You'll be there, Adrian said fiercely, pulling Ezra into his arms. I'll make sure of it. We'll adjust your medications, manage your symptoms, do whatever it takes. You're going to have your exhibition, Ezra. You're going to show the world your art. Ezra buried his face in Adrian's neck. I'm scared. What if I'm not strong enough? What if? Then I'll carry you if I have to, but you will be there. Adrian pulled back just enough to look into Ezra's eyes. This is your dream. This is what you've been working toward, and I will move heaven and earth to make sure it happens. Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last hour. Ezra laughed through his tears. I love you so much it's ridiculous, so much it scares me. Good, because I love you just as much, maybe more. Impossible, I definitely love you more. They dissolved into laughter, holding each other in the late afternoon light, and for a moment, Ezra's illness was just background noise. For a moment, they were just two people in love, celebrating good news, planning a future. Even if that future was measured in weeks instead of years. The next 2 months were a whirlwind. Ezra threw himself into preparing for the exhibition with an intensity that worried Adrian, but that he couldn't bring himself to discourage. This was Ezra's purpose, his legacy. Who was Adrian to tell him to slow down? Still, he monitored Ezra carefully. The medications were working, keeping Ezra stable if not improving. There were bad days, days when Ezra couldn't get out of bed, when his breathing was labored, when Adrian had to use every tool in his medical arsenal to keep Ezra comfortable. But there were also good days, days when Ezra painted with fierce joy, days when they made love slowly and tenderly, days when the world felt full of possibility. Adrian officially changed his schedule, taking more evening shifts so he could spend days with Ezra. His colleagues noticed the change, noticed that Dr. Cole smiled more, snapped less, seemed somehow more present. A few asked if he was seeing someone. Adrian deflected, protecting Ezra's privacy, but he couldn't hide the light in his eyes. 2 weeks before the exhibition, Adrian's ex-boyfriend's sister, Sarah, who had remained a friend, came to the hospital to visit. She found Adrian in the doctor's lounge, and the expression on his face when he thought no one was watching made her sit down beside him. You're in love, she said simply. Adrian started. Sarah, I don't deny it, I haven't seen you look like that since Marcus. She took his hand. Tell me about him. So Adrian did. He told her everything, about Ezra's illness, about their unlikely connection. About the fear and the love and the impossibility of it all. Sarah listened without judgment, and when he finished, she was crying. I'm so happy for you, she whispered, and so sad, but mostly happy, because you're living again, Adrian, you're letting yourself feel again. Marcus would have loved that. He's dying, Sarah. In months, maybe weeks, I'm going to lose him. I know, but you'll have had this. You'll have had love, real love, one more time. And he'll have had you, someone who sees him, who loves him, who makes his last months beautiful. She squeezed his hand. That's not nothing, Adrian, that's everything. Adrian's eyes burned. I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. You can, you will, because Ezra's given you something Marcus wanted you to have. The ability to live fully, to love deeply, to not be afraid of feeling. When the time comes, you'll grieve, but you won't be empty anymore. You'll carry both of them with you, and that will make you stronger. Adrian pulled Sarah into a hug, grateful for her wisdom, for her friendship, for the reminder that love, even temporary, even painful, was always worth it. The night of the exhibition arrived with perfect spring weather. Adrian picked Ezra up early, finding him dressed in a soft grey suit that made him look older, more sophisticated, but still heartbreakingly young. Ezra was nervous, his hands shaking as Adrian helped him with his tie. What if no one comes? What if they hate it? What if? Adrian caught Ezra's hands, stilling them. They're going to love it, because your art is you, honest, beautiful, full of hope. How could anyone not love it? You're biased. Completely, Adrian kissed him softly, but I'm also right, trust me. The gallery was small but elegant, with white walls and perfect lighting. As they arrived, Adrian's breath caught. Every painting Ezra had created over the past 6 months was displayed. Landscapes in impossible colors, portraits that seemed to breathe, abstract pieces that made your heart ache. And in the center, on the largest wall, was the painting Ezra had kept hidden, the one of Adrian. Adrian approached it slowly, his heart pounding. The painting showed him sitting by a window, bathed in soft light. But it wasn't just a realistic portrait. Ezra had painted him the way Ezra saw him. His eyes held warmth instead of coldness, his expression was open instead of guarded, and somehow, impossibly, the painting captured the moment Adrian had started to hope again, the moment he'd started to love again. At the bottom, in Ezra's careful handwriting, was a title, "The Man Who Taught Me That Love Doesn't Need Forever to Be Real." Adrian felt tears stream down his face. He turned to find Ezra watching him nervously. "Do you like it?" Ezra asked. "I love it, I love you. This is..." Adrian couldn't find words big enough. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me." Ezra's smile was radiant. "Good, because it's not for sale. That one's mine, well, ours." People began arriving, art collectors, critics, random people who'd seen the Instagram posts. Adrian stood back, watching Ezra come alive as he talked about his work, about his process, about the meaning behind each piece. Watching him, Adrian thought, this is what living looks like. This is what it means to make your brief time matter. The exhibition was a stunning success. By the end of the night, nearly every painting had a red sold dot beside it. Ezra was glowing, exhausted but happy, leaning heavily on Adrian as they said goodbye to the last visitors. "I did it," Ezra whispered. "I actually did it." "You did, I'm so proud of you. Take me home." "Always." But when they got back to Adrian's apartment, Ezra had been spending more time there lately. As his own apartment's stairs had become too difficult, Ezra collapsed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Adrian caught him, his medical training taking over immediately. Ezra, talk to me." "Tired," Ezra mumbled. "Just so tired. Can we just lie down?" Adrian's hands were shaking as he checked Ezra's pulse. "Too fast, too irregular. We need to go to the hospital." "No," Ezra's eyes opened fierce. "No hospitals, not tonight. Please, Adrian, I just want one night. One perfect night in your arms, please." Every instinct Adrian had screamed to rush Ezra to the ER. But looking into those eyes, those beautiful, hopeful, tired eyes, he made a choice. He chose love over medicine. He chose Ezra's wishes over his own fear. "Okay," Adrian whispered. "One night, but if you get worse..." "I won't, I promise." Ezra let Adrian carry him to bed, let Adrian undress him gently and tuck him under the covers. "Lie with me." Adrian stripped down and climbed in beside him, pulling Ezra close. Ezra's heartbeat was irregular against his chest, his breathing shallow but steady. "Adrian." "Yeah. Thank you for everything, for seeing me, for loving me, for making these last months the best of my life." Ezra's voice was drowsy. "I don't regret anything, not a single moment." "Neither do I," Adrian's voice broke. "I love you so much." "I know, I love you too. Forever, even if forever is shorter than we wanted." They lay in silence, Adrian listening to Ezra's heartbeat, memorizing the feel of him, the smell of him, the way their bodies fit together. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. He just held on, willing morning to never come, willing time to stop, willing anything that would let him keep this moment, this person, this love. When morning came, Ezra was still breathing, still alive, still there. Adrian let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Ezra, how do you feel?" "Surprisingly okay." Ezra opened his eyes and they were clear, bright. "Actually, better than I have in weeks. That's weird, right?" It was weird. Adrian did a quick examination and found that, impossibly, Ezra's vitals were better. Not perfect, not healed, but improved. "I don't understand. This doesn't make medical sense." "Maybe it doesn't have to." Ezra sat up slowly, carefully. "Maybe sometimes things just happen. Maybe sometimes we get more time than we thought." Adrian wanted to believe it, but he was a doctor. He knew that terminal meant terminal, that heart failure didn't spontaneously improve, that miracles were just coincidences given pretty names. "We should go to the hospital, get you checked properly." "Okay, but Adrian," Ezra took his hand, "whatever this is, whatever's happening, can we just be grateful for it? Can we not question it or analyze it or pick it apart? Can we just live?" Adrian pulled Ezra into his arms. "Yes, we can just live." The hospital tests were shocking. Ezra's heart function had improved dramatically, not to normal levels, never to normal, but to a place where his prognosis changed from months to possibly years. The doctors were baffled. They ran test after test looking for an explanation. Had the medications finally kicked in more effectively? Had some dietary change made a difference? Had there been a misdiagnosis originally? No one had answers. Medicine, for all its precision, sometimes couldn't explain why some people lived and others died. Sometimes the body just decided to fight a little longer. Dr. Peterson, Ezra's cardiologist, pulled Adrian aside. I can't explain it, but I also can't deny what the numbers show. His heart is still damaged, still weak, but it's stable. With continued medication management and careful monitoring, he could have years. Not decades, probably not even 10 years, but years. Actual years. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest, not grief this time, but hope. Raw, painful, terrifying hope. That night he took Ezra back to the roof garden where they'd first kissed. It was spring now, and the plants were budding, new life emerging from winter's death. They stood together under the stars, and Adrian pulled a small box from his pocket. This is insane, Adrian said. We've known each other for 5 months. You're 19, I'm 34. Every logical part of my brain is screaming that this is a terrible idea. But Ezra's eyes were shining. But I love you, and you taught me that love doesn't need perfect timing or logical reasons or guarantees of forever. You taught me that sometimes you just have to be brave enough to choose love, even when it's terrifying. Adrian opened the box, revealing 2 simple silver bands. These aren't engagement rings, not yet, but they're a promise that I'm in this for however long we have, a promise that I choose you, Ezra Bennett, I choose us. Ezra was crying openly now. You're proposing by explicitly saying you're not proposing. That's very you. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. Ezra threw his arms around Adrian's neck. I choose you too. For as long as we have, I choose you. Adrian slipped one ring onto Ezra's finger, and Ezra did the same for him. They stood there, holding each other under the stars, and Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace. Not because he wasn't still scared, not because he knew how this story would end, but because he'd learned something invaluable. Love isn't measured in years or decades. It's measured in moments, in choices, in the courage to open your heart even when you know it might break again. So what now? Ezra asked. We have years, actual years. What do we do with them? Adrian smiled. We live, we love, we make art and memories and mistakes. We fight sometimes and make up. We celebrate every Christmas together. He paused, realizing what he'd said. Christmas, the holiday he'd hated for 5 years, the holiday that had taken Marcus. But Ezra had given it back to him, had shown him that Christmas wasn't about loss, it was about miracles, about hope, about believing that sometimes, against all odds, beautiful things can happen. We celebrate every Christmas, Adrian continued, and every ordinary day in between. We don't waste a single moment on fear or regret. We just love each other as fully as we can, for as long as we can. That sounds perfect, Ezra whispered. They kissed under the stars, and Adrian thought, this is my miracle. This person, this love, this second chance at living. He'd walked into St. Catherine's Hospital 5 months ago as a man who'd forgotten how to feel, who'd convinced himself that hope was just another word for delusion. He was leaving tonight as a man who'd learned that miracles aren't about perfect endings or living forever. They're about finding light in darkness, about choosing love even when it's temporary, about believing that every moment matters, that every heartbeat is precious, that life, brief and fragile and utterly unpredictable, is always worth celebrating. I love you, Adrian said. I love you too, Ezra replied. Merry Christmas, Adrian, even though it's April. Adrian laughed, his eyes wet with tears. Merry Christmas, Ezra, every day with you is Christmas. And for the first time in 5 years, Adrian Cole believed in miracles again. The art studio was filled with afternoon light. Adrian stood by the window, watching Ezra work on his latest commission, a portrait of a young couple getting married. Ezra's hands were steadier now, his breathing easier. The new medications had been a game changer, and while his heart would never be normal, it had defied every expectation. 3 years, they'd had 3 years when they'd expected months. 3 Christmases together, 3 birthdays, 3 years of life and love and laughter. Stop watching me work, Ezra said without turning around. It's creepy. I'm admiring. Still creepy, but Ezra was smiling. How was your day? Long, saved 2 lives, lost 1, did 16 hours of paperwork. Adrian crossed the room, wrapping his arms around Ezra from behind. How was yours? Productive, finished the Henderson commission, started sketches for the gallery show in June, ate lunch, missed you. Ezra leaned back into Adrian's embrace. Normal day. It's normal, what a beautiful, ordinary word. They'd gotten married 6 months ago, a small ceremony with close friends and Sarah crying happy tears. Ezra's family had come around eventually, accepting Adrian and their relationship. Adrian's colleagues had been shocked but supportive. Life had settled into a routine, work and art and love and living. They'd had close calls. Twice, Ezra had been hospitalized with heart complications. but each time he'd fought back, stronger than anyone expected. The doctors now talked about him potentially being eligible for a transplant in a few years if his condition worsened, but he remained strong enough for surgery. Adrian, Ezra turned in his arms. What are you thinking about? How lucky I am, how grateful. For what? For you, for this, for every single day we've had together. Adrian kissed him softly, for believing in miracles when I'd given up on them. Ezra smiled, and it was the same smile that had captured Adrian's heart 3 years ago in a hospital room. I think you taught me something too. What's that? That miracles work both ways. You gave me love when I thought I'd die without ever knowing it. You gave me purpose and partnership and someone to paint for, to live for. Ezra's eyes were soft. We saved each other, Adrian. That's the real miracle. Adrian held him close, this beautiful, impossible person who changed his entire life. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall. Christmas was coming again, their 4th Christmas together. And Adrian Cole, who'd once hated Christmas more than anything, couldn't wait. Because he'd learned that sometimes the greatest miracles aren't about living forever. Sometimes they're about loving fully. And that was more than enough.